we've had, most notably, I suppose, steel, aluminium, 25%, as far as I know, across the board. I suppose it's just worthwhile mentioning in that context, just listening to I would have thought a reasonably representative radio interview on BBC 4, with a US steelworker, union official, and a British steelworkers representatives from South Wales, Tata. And the US guy said, well, we really welcome this. We've been, had our backs against the wall for years and years, and Trump's come to our rescue. And the brother from South Wales said, well, I understand your position, but the danger is that our steel plant will close, and I wish our government would do something along these lines. You can see this sort of dilemma for steel workers, and indeed it's going to be the same of workers in every country. The danger is that we're organized behind our ruling class, our governments, against each other, that we're calling upon them to impose tariffs against other companies, but also against other workers. And of course, the problem is, at least as far as I see it at the moment, it's not that the United States is all powerful. It isn't, and it never has been, but it is powerful still. It is still the global hegemon, and it's got more cards in its hand, or it's got higher cards in its hand in terms of this particular game that's being played out. And you can see that by countries responding to the 25% tariff, and then Trump instantly upping the ante. So Europe responds by tariffing various US commodities, and straight away Trump is in there. What was it with alcohol, with wine, 200% levy. We saw what happened. I think it was with Ontario in Canada. The governor in Ontario, or the head of government in Ontario, responded to Trump's tariffs by saying, okay, we're going to slap on tariffs to US goods that come over the border into our state in Canada. Trump instantly responds, with swinging tariffs. The governor collapses, and then they have negotiations. So I'm not saying for 1 second that the US is all powerful. There will be give and take, but most giving will be done by the non-United States, and the most taking will be done by the United States. Now, I'm not claiming anything here. I'm just illustrating something, just looking at the stock markets. This is the last time I read them. They could have changed. So I think this was Friday I looked at them. Either way, the Dow index was down 0.2%. On the other hand, Standard & Poor top 500 was up 0.5%. But there are those, and I don't think they're wrong, that says everyone is a loser in such tariff wars. So certainly, I think those who talk about Germany not only remaining in recession, but going deeper into recession are right. What's going to happen with Volkswagen? What's going to happen to the German auto industry? I was just reading earlier today that France is officially in stagnation. What's going to happen there? One would assume that it goes from stagnation to actually dropping in terms of the level of production. And one can repeat the same story, virtually without exception. I might be wrong But I would suggest under these circumstances, China is vulnerable to some sort of Japaneseification, i.e. being pushed into stagnation. I've read the article in this week's Weekly Worker by Michael Roberts. It's got lots of useful information, but the idea that what passes for central planning is going to allow China to defy the laws of gravity. I'm not convinced on that one. But of course, what applies to China, what applies to Germany, what applies to Canada above all? I mean, I think something like 80% of Canada's exports go to the United States. What applies to these countries also applies to the United States. So Donald Trump, for the first time, at least as far as I'm aware, has talked about the possibility in the United States of pain. There will be pain, but he promises that it will be worth it. So some sort of downturn in the stock exchange, some sort of stagnation, some sort of recession, far from impossible. If we look at the late 1920s, tariff wars weren't exactly unassociated with the crash and the long depression that followed it. So who knows? But yes, the United States will also experience pain. But as they say, I know it's a tired old cliche, but when the United States sneezes, the rest of the world gets a cold. Well, when the United States gets a cold, then what we're talking about is influenza as far as the rest of the world is concerned. So things look bleak for the world economy as far as I see it. And therefore we have to ask the question that given that it's supposedly we all lose, what's the rationale behind it? If you're just determined to reduce the living standards and the profits of your own citizens and punish the others, what's the purpose of it? And what I'm going to say here is going to be very, very tentative, and it's said with very little confidence that this is actually what's going to happen. But at least I think it might cast some light on what is intended to take place. And this is the result of me not doing vast research or anything like that. No, I've read two articles in the Financial Times by Gillian Tate. I think she might be the US editor of the Financial Times. We've got to remember that the Financial Times isn't an English paper or a British newspaper. It's much more a transatlantic paper with a very considerable readership in the United States amongst the business and political class. Either way, she's well connected in terms of American big business and American politics. So she's very tentative, but I think she's worth reading on this question. What is going on? What is the plan? What's the Trump rationale in all of this? And what she's suggesting is that what Trump and his advisors have in mind is redrawing the architecture of the world economy, but including the world financial economy. And she talks about, well, in 1985, there was the Plaza Accord. Long and the short of that was that Japan was forced into taking a massive hit. She thinks that at least what is being talked about is a Mar-a-Lago Accord that would effectively depreciate the dollar, or shall we put it, depreciate the dollar, depreciate the US debt to those that hold the dollar. So the paradox is, I was talking to comrades in my party cell on Friday, and we were talking about tariffs, and I was When we bring up the question of, economic uncertainty and everyone taking a hit, comrades were asking, like why? My answer was that, well, in the middle of economic uncertainty, where does money flow to? And the answer is, of course, even if the United States is in trouble, money flows into the United States because it's the global hegemon. And what is being proposed in the light of, and again, I haven't read up enough, so I'm really just following Gillian Tate here, following the ideas of one Michael Pettis. He's talking about taxing capital inflows. So you would expect tariffs to result in an inflow of capital into the United States from Germany, Japan, China, and all the rest of it. That's how things would go. And he's saying, don't let this happen without us taking a slice. Now, the figures shouldn't be taken seriously. Nonetheless, the scale of what we're talking about can be conveyed by his estimate that over a decade, if you did that, the US could be up by $2 trillion, which over a decade is a lot for you and me, a lot for most countries. It's not a huge amount, but it's a significant amount. But this is what seems to be at least being proposed and perhaps being accepted. She describes the situation around Trump consisting of three factions. Two of them favor such a course and one doesn't. We don't know, in other words, what the result will be, but this is at least a possibility, and it would make sense for us to at least look at it, because it helps us to understand at least what the bigger picture is of this tariff war that I've already described. The idea would be, not only do you get a slice of the capital coming in, what you do is you actually suppress the value of the dollar. What you do is suppress what they call, this is Pettis, this economist that Gillian Tate is quoting, you reverse what she calls, or this Michael Pettis calls, the excessive financialization of the US economy. So the idea would be that you reshore steel production, aluminium production, the production of a huge number of different enterprises that have been offshored with financialization. And with a weaker dollar, you get a stronger industry. In other words, US steel, US aluminium, US commodities become cheaper, therefore they can be made in the United States, sold in the United States, and also exported from the United States. So there's also an idea as part of this Mar-a-Lago Accord to actually, as I said, devalue US debt, not just in the shape of devaluation of the dollar, but actually transforming dollar debts into government bonds. In other words, the United States would effectively default on its present debt. That would be the effect of it. So those that have assets in the United States wouldn't be stripped of it, but the value of their assets in the United States would be devalued, not only in dollar terms, but in global terms as well. So the argument is that dominance, US dominance will continue, and indeed US dominance will be asserted. US decline will be reversed. And again, going hand in hand with this guy, Pettis, apparently J.D. Vance is an admirer of his economics. The idea would be that you then divide, this is what I read in Gillian Tett, you divide the world into three categories. The red category would be foes. These are people that you don't like. Then there will be the greens. These are people who are friends, and you offer friends military protection, and you offer them tariff relief, presumably with something in return. And then there's the yellow category. And this would be, well, people who might have been friends and people who might have been foes, but you've done a deal with. In other words, you could imagine the United States doing a deal with China. Maybe you can't. Either way, China either falls into the red category, or perhaps if it does a deal, it would fall into the yellow category. Now, as I said, I'm not able to comment. I know, I mean, Gillian Tett says, well, mainstream economists think that this is mad, can't work. She's much more cautious on that. She goes, it might work, might not work. They might implement it, they might not implement it. But the reason I thought I'd introduce it is because it at least gives us some sort of rationale behind the tariff wars. And what she says is that there's internal logic to this proposal. In other words, it isn't Donald Trump shooting himself in the foot, just doing damage to the US economy. There's a bigger picture. And I think the bigger picture, working out what the bigger picture is, if there's a bigger picture, is important for us, absolutely vital, actually, for us at the present time. You can certainly say one thing for sure, and that is things are changing in a very big, and I would argue very unpredictable manner, because it isn't just reliant on the United States. Yes, it's a superpower, it's a super imperialism, but is China going to be an easy pushover? What about Europe? Aren't they going to do something about it? I think Canada's very vulnerable, but is it just going to take it and, give in and say, okay, let's become the 51st state? I don't know, but there's a good possibility that they will resist and, upend, the easy. All America needs to do is click its fingers and everyone else jumps into line. And I think that this also then at least provides some sort of background to interrogating what's going on in Ukraine or about Ukraine at the present time. We've